Hi friends, it's Katie, and today I am doing a video that's going to be a tag called Tarot Obsessed, and it is inspired by Imogen Walters' Oracle Obsessed tag that I did earlier, and basically I just decided to turn it into a tarot tag. I was talking to Kasha in the comments and we were saying how great this would be for tarot because it was a really awesome tag and I loved it, but it was very Oracle specific obviously, and so I just kind of turned almost all of the questions as they were into tarot questions, and added a few and changed one or two around to make them a little bit different and more applicable to the discussion of tarot. So obviously I would love for anyone else who wants to jump in to answer this either as a tag, or if you want to answer a question or two or all of them in the comments below, you're totally welcome to do that too. For this, if you want to use the hashtag Tarot Obsessed, I thought that made most sense, seeing as we had Oracle Obsessed, we can have Tarot Obsessed too. Anyway, I'm sure this will probably not be the shortest video ever, so let's jump in. Question 1 is, what was your very first tarot deck? Now, I've told this story before. My very first deck was Tarot of a Moon Garden, which I got when I was 14 or 15. I found it while I was kind of fumbling around a smoking paraphernalia slash hippie shop in Townsville that one of my friends worked at. And I saw it on the shelf and I was just kind of obsessed with it. I couldn't put it down. So I bought it and I came home all excited telling Mum that I'd bought a tarot deck. I didn't really have any clue what it was. It was just really appealing to me and I was obsessed with it for about 12 months and then I don't really know what happened to it after that. Question 2, what is your current favourite deck? Now that for me is quite an easy choice. It is Stella's Tarot. I actually have 2 copies of this deck, believe it or not. This is my trimmed version, and this was it's been one of my favorite decks for a long time, a few years now. I think I got it in 2015, and I loved it right away. I just really connected with it, found it very easy to read, and then a few months ago I trimmed it and regretted it actually, but then I traded for an intact copy. And then I felt guilty. I felt like I was cheating on my old Stella's Tarot. So I've actually, even though I now have a full intact edition with the large border and everything, I haven't really been using it. I've been playing with my old one. And it's just as fabulous and snarky and dry as ever, and I just adore it. It's one of my favorite decks of all time, but at the moment it's just probably my most used deck of the last 3 or 4 months. Question 2 is, what is your most used deck? That is a very easy question to answer. That would be my Centennial Rider-Waite-Smith. It's just one of those decks that's just super easy to use, and that is kind of a go-to for me. The Rider-Waite in general, the Rider-Waite-Smith in general I use a lot, but this just seems to be the one. I just have it in a bag sitting up on my desk, so it's just one of those ones that I reach for, and it's just a staple. It's such a steady, easy deck to read with. Obviously it's a great deck to study with. It's also a deck that I've done a lot of my therapeutic tarot stuff with, especially around my strengths and building confidence and stuff, which I did a whole video on. I use this deck a lot. It's just such a fabulous one. Question 4 is, what is your least used tarot deck? That would be this deck, because it's brand new. Now I feel like I'm cheating a little bit because the Anna K would come probably second to the Rider-Waite-Smith for being my most used deck ever, but I recently traded for the 2nd edition self-published Anna K, and it just arrived the other day and I really love it. It's beautiful. It's a lot smaller, which is something that I really like. The colors are a little bit different and the borders are obviously different, as is the title, but I really like it, but I haven't read with it yet. I was wondering, did you guys want me to do a comparison video between the Llewellyn edition and this one? I wasn't sure if it was worthwhile doing or if people would be interested, but I think you can still get this one from her website, so if that's something you'd like to see, let me know in the comments below. Question 5 is, how did you learn to read tarot? Now I didn't really learn when I had that original Tarot of a Moon Garden. I more just, went through the little white book and wrote down the meetings. But when I got back into tarot, there were a few resources that really did a lot for me. One was this book, The Tarot Revealed by Paul Fenton Smith. I now have, I think, all of his other tarot books, and a newer copy of this book too. I got this one at Savers for $3 a few years ago now, and this is my favorite tarot book. I love it. It just was one of the first tarot books that I read, and the meanings just made sense to me. I think a big thing in learning the tarot is, if you want to go the book route, is finding a book that just makes sense to you, because all different tarot readers and authors will have different perspectives on the cards. And Paul Fenton Smith, from memory, he associates the quartz with the same elements that I intuitively did so, which is not very common, and that's the page being air, knight fire, queen water, and king earth. That's a very uncommon thing, but from memory, Paul Fenton Smith does that, and just little things like that made this book, obviously taught me a lot, but it just came easily when I was reading through. So this is my favorite tarot book of all time. Then also I watched through Kellyanne's tarot trainee course. I've watched that several times over the years. I just thought that was such a great introduction. But then in terms of reading the cards, I've said this before, and it was my fabulous Osho Zen. I got this from Savers too, actually. Thank you, Savers, for teaching me how to read tarot. I picked this up from Savers, and I'd been studying tarot, learning tarot, and I knew the meanings of the cards and that sort of thing, but I still was struggling to lay out 3 or 5 or 10 cards and weave them together to create a cohesive story. That's what I was struggling with, the actual reading part of reading tarot, if that makes sense. And this deck absolutely taught me how to do that, as well as the Stella's tarot. This one came into my life first, and I think I'm really bad with timing, but maybe 6 months after, the Stella's came into my life. And those decks, between them, I started to hear the voice of the cards. The thing that really kind of took me up to the next level was when I started reading for other people. That includes my mom and my friends, but when I started reading for people that I didn't know. And I did that for about a year through an app site where you get paid a little bit of money to interpret, some cards every day. And that was a massive learning curve for me. And it was after that I felt confident offering my readings on Etsy. The next question 6, is what do you use tarot for? Now, I'm just going to show you the stretch tarot while I talk. The stretch tarot is a beautiful deck. And I use tarot in a lot of ways. I use it for reading, for divination. I use it for problem solving. I use it for my therapeutic tarot stuff that I talk about a little bit here on the channel. And that is really personal development, mental well-being stuff. I also use it for fun. I like to, if I'm watching a TV show, I like to sit there with a deck and shuffle, and if a card pops out, I kind of try to imagine what it could mean in regards to the story that I'm listening or watching. I use the cards as bookmarks, as meditation and mindfulness tools. I use tarot to connect with people through my readings that I do, both through my Etsy shop and with my friends. I use tarot to self-soothe, to focus, to help me remember what's really important to me, to sort out priorities. I use tarot for so much, and it's just such a wonderful tool and a really big part of my life. Question 7 is, how do you read tarot? Using books, your intuition, or something in between? Now, this is my fantastic menagerie, which I'm showing you for a reason. I'm definitely someone who enjoys structure and enjoys learning the theory. And so everything that I do with tarot, I very much come from the perspective of someone who knows the system well, and really appreciates and honors the system. I have the basis of the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith meanings that kind of really give me confidence and a stable ground to work from. But then when I'm reading, whatever comes through clearly and most loudly, that's what I go with. And sometimes that's the traditional meaning, and other times it's the opposite. It's something completely new and different. And I just kind of really let that happen. However that's going to happen, I just let it happen. Because that's the beauty of working with tarot. You're never quite sure what's going to come through, what's going to happen, what the cards have to say. But they always have something really wonderful to teach us. if we only have the courage to listen. So yeah, I'm definitely in between. I love being aware of and knowing and being comfortable with the traditional meanings, and knowing that, you know, if I draw a blank for whatever reason, I can at least start from that groundwork that I've already laid. But in terms of, you know, anything more than that, it's definitely my intuition that takes over. Question 8 is, do you use spreads or do you read freeform? I am definitely a spreads person. I love reading with spreads, and I will use all different kinds of spreads and different sizes. And even when I don't have a spread in mind, before I draw a card, I will be asking a specific question. So if I want help with my relationship, say, I'll be shuffling going, what is it that I need to know? And I'll draw a card, and that will be my first answer. And then I might be like, okay, so I don't know, why are my partner and I not connecting? I'll draw the next card. So even if I don't have a set spread, I'm still kind of defining the positions as I go, if that makes sense. I don't ever just really draw 5 cards and go from there. That's just not really my style. I think I'm a little bit too much of a structured, organized person. But hey, maybe that's something I'll do in the future. But for now, I'm definitely a spreads person, even if that spread is created on the fly. Question 9 is, do you mix tarot with other divination systems? And my answer is, of course, yes, I do. Just with oracle cards. I'll often draw an oracle card at the end of the reading, for example. But other than that, no, not really. Those are kind of my main 2 systems. Question 10 is a tricky one. It's, what makes a great tarot deck? And this is trickier, I think, to answer than the same question was in regards to oracle decks. I do appreciate a great tarot guidebook. These are 3 that I have on hand and that I really like. The Spiral Tarot Guidebook is, I think, one of the best tarot guidebooks ever. It's absolutely brilliant, and it took my understanding of the deck to a whole new level. I appreciate a deck that kind of stands on its own, but you don't have to, you know, understand the ins and outs of every kind of magical system under the sun, and you don't have to know the intricate backstory of the author to understand the deck. But equally, if there is a guidebook, that it is thorough and that it talks about the pictures and kind of really explicitly helps you understand the intention behind the picture. Although, speaking of guidebooks, I'm kind of noticing myself getting a little bit tired of some guidebooks, especially with the mass-produced decks. It just seems like every deck now comes with a 300-page guidebook, and a lot of the times they're pretty close to a Rider-Waite-Smith based system and meanings, and it almost feels like it's just overkill, like it's not really adding 300 pages worth of value to the conversation of tarot. So if a deck is going to include a book, I just kind of really want it to be something a little bit new, and I want it to relate specifically to the deck to be worth my time. And then, of course, I really appreciate seeing diversity in decks. We speak a lot about like racial diversity, which is awesome, and gender identity and things like that, and sexuality as well in the tarot community. That's kind of starting to be more of a conversation we're having. Still not really seeing it in our mass-produced decks, but we are seeing it more and more in our indie decks, which is amazing. But of course, there are other forms of diversity that would be awesome to see, like more representations of disability, things like that. So diversity, representation, that sort of stuff is really, really awesome to see in decks, and that's something that I really appreciate. Question 11, how important to you is it that a deck sticks to the system, whether that's Rider-Waite, Marseille, Thoth, whatever system it is that you use? For me, that would be Rider-Waite. I just personally find it a lot easier to connect with decks that are based off the system that I know so well. So it's not like a do or die for me. It's just that I'm much more likely to look at the images and be like, oh, that's a really cool, interesting take on the 8 of Swords. Do you know what I mean? Rather than looking at it and going like, what's that supposed to be? So I'm not like, I don't need it to copy this imagery just with different art style. But I do find that I get more out of decks that are at least based on this system. But I'm not a stickler for, you know, all of the major arcana remaining the same in terms of the names or the genders. Same with the suits. I don't mind that sort of stuff changing, as long as it makes sense and that it's done in a way that makes the deck feel whole and authentic. Then I'm all for people kind of experimenting and pushing the boundaries of what makes a tarot deck. Question 12 is one that I'm adding in, is do you have any double ups or backups of decks? I have 3 decks that I have multiple copies of. The first is obviously the Rider-Waite Smith, which I have, I think, 5 copies of now. And I've done heaps of videos talking all about that and the different editions that I have. Then, as I mentioned, I also have my trimmed copy of the Stella's Tarot and my untrimmed copy of the Stella's Tarot. So this is what it looks like with these big borders. The Anna K Tarot. This one is the self-published 2nd edition, and this is of course Llewellyn's. And this was not something I was super planning on getting, but someone offered it for a trade, and I'd always been curious because this is one of my most used, most loved decks. So yeah, now I do have officially 2 copies of the Anna K as well. Question 13 is, do you have any unusual or unique decks? I think my most unique and unusual deck would probably be my Linda Famira. I don't know if that's how you say it, but this is a very small deck. I don't know, it's the smallest deck that I own. And so that makes it unique in and of itself. But then what makes it really kind of special is it's quite rare. It was originally published as part of a magazine in Germany, and basically all the cards were, you can kind of see there's kind of like bumps, not very big but small bumps on the sides of some cards still. Basically they were all attached and made up, you know, a big sheet that you pulled apart into cards. So yeah, it was just a one-off, came with a magazine in Germany however long ago. So it's quite rare. Like, I think that word gets thrown around quite a bit. If something's out of print, all of a sudden it's rare. That's not quite the case. But I think this one would be one of the few decks that I own that would actually be considered at least hard to find. It's not one I've heard spoken about online much at all. And it's a cute little thing. It's quite Rider-Waite based, but some of the images are a little bit different. Some are a bit more cropped or whatever, a bit more simplistic. Obviously it's black and white. But yeah, it's really cool, cute little thing. Question 14 is, what is your current deck crush? So from memory, when Imogen first did the Oracle Obsessed tag, this question was, you know, basically what deck are you seeing on Instagram that, you know, you're really crushing on, that you would really like to have? I don't really have a whole lot of decks on my wish list, and I don't really have a crush on any decks that I don't have. I do, however, have a crush on the Sasarabito Tarot. This deck is pretty new to me. I got it about a month ago and I love it. I'm a little bit obsessed with it. It's just such a brilliant reading deck. And I wasn't quite expecting how clear it would be. It's a really awesome deck, and I I went through a little period where I just didn't want to use any other deck ever again, which I think was a little overdoing it a little bit. I knew that, but it's really kind of very quickly found its place into my heart, and I'm totally crushing on this deck. It's one of my favorites. I don't think I've fallen this hard for a deck since, I don't know, this hard and this quickly. I don't know. It's been a while. So yeah, I'm definitely crushing on this deck. It's totally one that I've jumped hardcore on the bandwagon. Sorry, not sorry. Don't even care. Totally in love with it. Such a great deck, and I really dig the artwork. And I have one more question that I wanted to throw in, and that is, do you read reversals or not? And I guess I'll just answer this really quickly. No, I don't. I find that reversals just kind of confuse me more, and just muddy the waters. For me, the position that the card falls in the spread, and also my intuition and how that card is playing with other cards in the spread, that will determine whether it's in shadow or not. So I just find that I read reversals in the sense that I read different dimensions of the card, both light and shadow and all of that sort of thing, but I let other things guide whether it's in shadow, rather than just literally the card being upside down. I remember I did try to read with reversals when I was learning, and I just kept getting tripped up, and I just couldn't quite, you know, it was really getting in the way of me reading and learning to read and me building confidence as a reader. And eventually I just decided to go back to basics and take out the reversals, and almost instantly it clicked. So reversals just aren't for me, at least not at this stage in my journey. And our final question is, if you could only use one deck for the rest of time, which would it be? I really tried to not break the rules too much with these tags. You know, no, I'm not against anyone who does, but I try really hard to stick to it, because I often find that I'm the sort of person that once I break the rule a little bit, I'll just like keep breaking the rule, and then I won't really answer any of the questions, if that makes sense. But with this one, I really found it hard. I have to do two. I just can't not. Obviously, the first and foremost would be the Guild Tarot. Like, it is my one true love. Like, I don't want to say I couldn't live without this deck, because, you know, at the end of the day, it's just a deck of cards. But this is the deck that is most special to me, is most dear to me, is most important to me in terms of my own spiritual and psychological development and contentment. Like, it's just, if I could only use one deck for the rest of my life for me, it would be this deck. The thing is, I don't want to read for anyone else with this deck. So I can't not choose this one, because it is my favorite deck ever. No questions asked. Like, I don't even have to think about that for half a second. But I really enjoy reading for other people, and I wouldn't be able to do that with this deck, I don't think. Even if I had to, I just don't think that I would be comfortable reading for very many people with this deck. I don't know. It feels like a really personal, important experience that I'm not sure if I want to just share that with anyone and everyone, you know? So I couldn't say any other deck except the Guild Tarot in answering this question. But I would also need to add a second deck for if I wanted to keep reading for other people. And that would be a pretty easy choice too. I would choose the Rider-Waite-Smith. Obviously I have other decks that I absolutely adore, like the Fantastic Menagerie, the Anna Kay. The World Spirit is another one I use for reading for people. The Circo Tarot. Those are kind of my big ones that I use for other people a lot, but I feel like if I could only have one for reading for anyone else, I'd just pick the Rider-Waite, because it's such a staple. And even though those other decks I feel like they do certain things better, at the end of the day, the Rider-Waite-Smith can kind of cover all grounds really well. I don't know if that makes sense. So I hope you'll forgive me this small cheat, but I couldn't quite answer this question without breaking the rules a little bit. But I guess if I could only have one deck for myself, it would be the Guild Tarot. And if I could only have one deck to read for other people, it would be Rider-Waite-Smith. So I feel like I've been fairly reasonable in breaking that rule. So that is my Tarot Obsessed video. I do hope you enjoyed this. This is a lot of fun. I always love these videos. If you've done a response to this, please leave the link in the comments below so I can come and check your video out. I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody else's responses if you would like to jump on board. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you all again very soon. So much love, guys. Bye.